Israel Folau and David Pocock are hopeful of returning. Now, speaking of rugby, former and current Wallaby stars will take part in a new study into the physical effects of playing that sport. Their brains and hearts will be monitored to help scientists measure how tackles damage organs. And for more, Professor Stuart Greaves from the Heart Institute joins me now. And Stuart, thanks very much for your time. Let's start with the brain and then we'll go to the heart. What is this new technique you're calling multi-band diffusion imaging?
Yeah, well, the long form of it is multi-band, multi-shell diffusion imaging, and it's a really exciting technique, especially for someone like me that does imaging as a profession, where we can map the brain's circuits in intricate detail. It's something like 10 or 20 times more detailed than any data that I've been able to use before, so we're looking to apply it to really understand what's happening in the neural circuits in this elite band of rugby players.
I know there's some crossover here in the NFL. Well, scientists, not so much the NFL, led the way in research here into brain damage and repetitive brain trauma. Is this the way that you're going now? Is that better than waiting to get brains to examine by players who have died?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's important. And really what they're studying there is what we call chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and that's a really extreme form of brain damage. I think what we're more likely to see in this current band of rugby greats is we're more interested in looking at the circuits and how it affects their cognition and emotional regulation. So brain damage can take lots of forms. We have a lot of reserve in terms of our brain function, and what we'd like to know and understand is how, if at all, how are the circuits disturbed by a lifetime of running into people and experiencing G-forces of up to 100 Gs, which is pretty high.
Another part of your research is centring around the aorta. Tell us what you've found here and what you're hoping to look for in the future.
So what we're doing is we're looking at the ascending aorta, and one of our co-investigators, Sharon Kay, did a study prior to this at North Shore Hospital, and she found that in elite rugby players, their aortas were markedly enlarged compared to even normal rugby players that weren't perhaps competing at that sort of state of origin national level. So we're using a technique called 4D flow MRI to really precisely measure what's going in the aorta, and we think it may well be that for certain players in certain positions with the different body types, they might be having small collisions that build up over a career that might place them at risk of aneurysms or dissections. So
if you think that might be a result of having sort of chest trauma, for want of a better term, being hit in the chest?
They're big collisions. The other theory is that it might be also part of the training. When you're training, you often do something called a Valsalva manoeuvre, where you hold your breath in while you strain. But we simply don't know at this point. But I guess what we're trying to do is establish a baseline in a group that's had a lot of impact and a lot of training at a level which would be the absolute maximum that any humans had ever done. So yeah. I think it'll be very interesting what we find, I think.
Oh, and Stuart, just one final one we've seen in this World Cup, bigger hits than ever, which is natural. Players are bigger, faster and stronger than they've ever been. My question is, what happens with all of this evidence that you get? Can you make a difference? There's really no way of changing the way the game's played to avoid collisions, is there?
Yeah, I think we can make a difference. What we need to understand is what are the nature of the hits that are contributing to the injury, and in fact what the injuries are themselves. And although we know the end results of some of the injuries, we don't actually precisely know, for instance, what the acute changes in the brains are at a neural network level. All we can see are behavioural changes or changes in cognitive tests. So if we can get a baseline off a group of players that have done a lot of footy, and we're also doing a parallel study in 13 to 16-year-olds who've had a concussion, what we're hoping to do is inform what we know and help design a study that's prospective and probably target players that are 16, 17-year-old and going into a life of professional football, and use these technologies to really absolutely, truly understand what's going on. And I think that sort of data can help us, modify the rules or perhaps inform decisions about return to play at a greater level than is possible currently.
Fascinating work, Stuart. I'm sure all parents out there that are wondering which direction to push their kids in sport want to know as well. So we'll stay in contact when you've got something more to report, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Stuart Grieve there. And that's it from me. Back to the couch.
Fascinating research there and some serious warnings as well. Thanks, BK. Let's take a look.